evening, and welcome to Law Talk, the show that brings the law, the Constitution, and the issues of today into an understanding from a legal perspective. Mark, how are you doing this night?
Excellent, excellent.
And so what are we covering tonight?
Well, we're going to start off with the Fiscal Cliff Avoided.
Was the fiscal cliff averted?
Well, technically, yes.
And what is the fiscal cliff?
The Fiscal Cliff was a political impasse or confrontation that was they've been kicking the can down the road for a long time to try to decide how to handle the economy. Kind of tough because they haven't had a budget for 4 years or forever, for a long time. There's been no budget.
No budget under this administration.
No, there's been no budget for 4 years, but they're trying to figure out what to do with the economy, but they don't have any numbers to work with.
Well, I understand because we have the $16 trillion in debt that finding a solution to the spending problem and the taxing problem was at the heart of the fiscal cliff.
Well, the fiscal cliff was they were going to make some automatic cuts to, conservative causes and liberal causes, very, very, very sharp cuts. They were going to take from the military, which would be bad for the conservatives. They were going to take from, social
all the
spending,
social programs,
social spending,
right,
kind of thing,
right.
Kind of get out the vote method things that they usually
right.
use.
Well, that was the sequester. That
right.
was the agreement that was established between the bipartisan committee,
right.
and what they came up with is a sequester, which said if you can't reach a budget by the end of 2012, on January 1st of 2013, we're going to automatically implement these dramatic, draconian cuts. Half, what was it? $500 billion from defense and $500 billion from the social programs. Now, did they do that on January 1st?
Well, I think what the deal came down to was they're going to raise taxes on kind of a smattering of things. They're raising taxes on 77 million Americans through their Social Security taxes are going up, or their FICA taxes are FICA is going up from 4.2 to 6.2. So that's kind of $1,000 to a guy who makes $50,000 a year more taxes. They're going to raise taxes for folks making over $450,000 quite a bit.
Aren't they going up to 39.6%?
Right,
Isn't that the next number? And that 77 number, isn't that 77%? Not 70, it's a huge number. It's over 3/4 of the country is having a direct taxing relationship as a result of the fiscal cliff Band-Aid they put on by January 1st.
One of the biggest things is the capital gains is going up from 15 to 20%.
That's a lot.
Now, capital gains is kind of a way that you would convince investors. You take your money out of savings, take it out of gold, take it back from overseas or whatever you're doing, put it into America and invest it into American businesses, right? And you'll be taxed 15%. Now, a lot of people say, well, why is, capital gains so low? How come it's not 39, 50%? How come it's not 95%? How come it's not 100%? Because it's capital gains.
Well, wait a minute.
But the thing is, usually when people have capital gains, they earned it once. They already paid their 45, 50, 75% of whatever you add up all your taxes. And then they're investing in that, and then they're going to pay double taxation on it. That was the reason you had about 15%. But I think more than that, I think the biggest thing is the capital gains increase, because that's basically the government saying to people, don't invest in business. Hold on to your money. We're going to invest in government because we depend on government, and don't really invest in business. Keep your money, if you're a big corporation, keep your money overseas. If you're here in the United States, keep your money in gold. Don't invest in business. Don't take any risk. We're going to put the money in the government. The government's going to take care of you. There's no more risk. The government's going to take care of you.
Okay, well, this seems to be a pattern in this administration going back to the first 4 years. And now the grand scheme that I've seen in this administration is to have a cradle-to-grave type of environment. But investment is what drives the economy in a capitalist society.
Well, not anymore.
That's what it's supposed to be. That's what capitalism is.
Yeah, but
if money's sitting offshore, we all know there's about $1 trillion sitting offshore from companies like Google, Oracle, just sitting there, and they're not bringing it back because they see no way to invest it properly, and the government refuses to give them a break to bring it back, which would stimulate the economy. But how did the fiscal cliff stimulate the economy?
Well,
or did it?
I don't know if it did any stimulation of the economy. What it did, it said, okay, we're going to kind of double down on the theory that we're going to raise taxes and then have more government spending. And we're going to grow the government, spend more money on government programs, and we're going to raise taxes. So that's kind of what the result was.
But wait a minute. Let's use an example. France passed a law that 75% of all your income, if you're above a certain dollar figure,
unless you move to Russia,
like Gerard Depardieu, and he got a Russian passport. But you saw that the French courts rejected that. The French Supreme Court said, no, we are not going to do that. This is unconstitutional. You can't tax people 75% of their income.
But if you really start
I've heard those numbers here.
But if you start adding up, your property tax, your sales tax, like say, you're at 10% in San Francisco, you've got your property tax, you've got income tax, we're getting in that 60-70% area here,
well,
too.
you realize that they're not taxes. They're fees.
Yeah, well, fees or taxes, whatever you want to call them. If it walks like a duck and talks like a duck,
it must be a duck.
It's pretty much a duck. But yeah, we're in that area. We're in the 60-70%
Okay,
range.
so now let's go back to the sequester, which is actually one of the scariest events out of this. We had, in fact, the fiscal cliff. Let me redefine this properly. The fiscal cliff is actually the sundown of the Bush tax cuts, which included an estate tax being raised from 35 to 55%. And the maximum number being reduced from 5 million to 1 million on the exemption side. So right there, did they include any of the estate tax changes?
I'm not exactly positive, but I think the exemption stayed
at 5 million.
I think it stayed the same or close to the same. Yeah.
Now, did they still use the idea that high income is 250,000, or did they? I understand that they wanted to bump that up to 450,000.
I think 450,000 is what they consider rich now. It started out being millionaires, and then the millionaires became 200,000 years, and then they kind of bounced around. The millionaires became 450,000 years. So
that's not that much money.
But the thing about it is, what it really comes down to is it's a matter of concept. Because you talk about a tax cut, I don't really believe you can have a tax cut. I mean, people honestly earn income, and then depending on the power of the government, they confiscate some of that income, and they call that a tax. But see, now it's not that you have honestly earned income and the government's confiscating some of that money. Now all the government's the money. They have everything. Everything you earn is the government's, and then they let you have some back. Is really what we're coming up to against now.
Well,
the government's
but once again, are we changing the basic format of what this country's built on, which is capitalism, independence, driving for yourself, the ability to earn a living is my right. That didn't work out.
That didn't work
out.
So
are we changing all that?
We're not doing that anymore. No, we're not doing it.
We're giving that all up.
We're giving that up. The government.
And what are we letting come to?
Well, the government has an elite of very intelligent, well-trained, very efficient people. They're in charge of everything now, and they just kind of tell everyone what to do for their own good.
For their own good.
Because if you were going to make your own individual decisions, you would be making these silly, stupid decisions. When the government's in charge and telling you what to do, everything works a lot better.
Well, is that the new reality then?
That's under this new program. That's the way things are going here. That the money is controlled by the government now, and a tax cut. Well, wait a minute, it's not a tax cut. It's your money. How can someone cut something that's yours? Right?
That's yours to begin with. You've earned it.
But just using that, the fact that people say tax cut means that the government everything belongs to the government. And then they cut some of what they're taking from you and giving you back. So
but wait a minute.
This
is sounding more and more like Greece and Spain and Portugal and Italy. Where are we going with this? Are we supposed to expect that from the moment we're born, like little Jimmy at 1 month old is already starting to get a check from the government?
Well, no, but I mean, there's different classes. There's if you work for the government, then you're kind of like, you're prison.
Immune.
Well, you're like a prison guard. And if you were out there in the private enterprise working, you're like the prisoner. You're like the slave, and you support the government. So you've got an elite in government, and then you've got your worker bees who are in the private enterprise.
I understand that, but this sounds like that TV show that used to be on a long time called The Prisoner, where you don't know who's really running anything, and you're running up and down the beach hoping you find something, and the only thing chasing you is that big ball down the beach. But is that what the fiscal cliff is chasing?
Well, the fiscal cliff, what happens, they raise taxes. They didn't really do any cuts at all in government spending. Government grew, taxes went up.
Well, listen, I think we're going to have to leave it there because this fiscal cliff I know we're going to come back to because they're coming back to
Well, in 2 months, it's going to resurface on the debt limit.